Hi, my name is Lindsay Mitchell, and I did my biomechanical assessment for injury prevention on independent wheelchair transfers. An independent wheelchair transfer is performed by individuals who are in a wheelchair long term. This can be due to spinal cord injuries in which the individual has use of their upper body but not their lower. A full-time wheelchair user performs 15 to 20 transfers per day for bathing, hygiene, and driving, and that unfortunately leads to a lot of stress on the upper limbs. My goal is to break down the overall transfer movement from a wheelchair to a secondary surface and to describe what areas of the body are affected most. I'll then explain how training can increase an individual's efficiency when performing the transfer and overall making it safer to do. Finally, I'll break down the transfer assessment instrument, which is a quantitative biomechanical assessment method used to rate a wheelchair user's ability to perform a transfer on a scale of 1 to 10. My goal is to show that increased training levels can decrease an individual's chances of getting hurt. For the purposes of this demonstration, I moved the wheelchair up to the transfer surface because I don't have the ability to wheel myself up. The proper breakdown involves scooting the trunk of the body towards the edge of the seat, placing the feet in a stable position on the floor, then leaving the trailing hand on the initial surface while the other hand reaches towards the target surface. In this movement, the muscles in the arm are used to push off and pivot the body around the feet, swinging the trunk to land on the target surface. The three joints affected are the shoulder joint, elbow joint, and the wrist joint. The shoulder joint is a ball and socket joint, the elbow is a hinge joint, and the wrist is an ellipsoidal joint. The elbow and wrist experience compressional stress, and all three joints experience some rotational or torsional stresses as the body pivots while transferring. A compressional stress results from a load that acts in a direction to push the molecules of a material more tightly together at the analysis plane. A torsional stress is a load that results from torques around the long axis of an object at each end. In class, we discussed Wolff's Law, which states that a bone changes external shape and internal composition in responses to stresses acted on it. When a tissue has large amounts of stress exerted onto it, it will hypertrophy and get bigger, while tissue that has little to no stress exerted onto it will atrophy and get smaller. To sum it up, a tissue adapts to the level of stress imposed onto it. A long-term wheelchair user will experience hypertrophy in their upper limbs due to constant and heavy usage, while the lower limbs will atrophy due to no stresses being applied to them. A survey involving 130 people with spinal cord injuries found that 58.5% report upper limb pain, of which 71% have shoulder pain, 35% have elbow pain, 53% have wrist pain, and 43% have hand pain. Overall, 65% reported upper limb pain that hindered transfer performance. Individuals reported that many times this pain in their shoulders, hands, wrists, and elbows resulted in shoulder pain, impingement syndrome, ulnar nerve entrapment at the elbow, and carpal tunnel syndrome. Because this is such a consistent issue with wheelchair users, researchers decided it was time to try and find better ways to perform the transfer movement. One study out of the University of Pittsburgh tested 3 different transfer methods. They included the head hips with arm extended, head hips with arms close, and trunk upright with arm extended. They found that each one had its own pros and cons related to forces at different spots on the arm, but the head hips methods were considered the best for the overall population for wheelchair users. When comparing all 3 techniques, the head hips method's trunk flexion angle was significantly higher. This is advantageous because it recruits larger muscles like the pectoralis major and latissimus dorsi, relying less on the smaller muscles around the shoulders. This helps to protect the rotator cuff tendons more efficiently against injury. Also, the head-hips methods reduce peak superiorly directed forces at all 3 limb locations. Now I've talked about training, but how do you train to prevent injuries in a wheelchair transfer? One of the more obvious options includes involving upper body strength training into your workouts more frequently so that your muscles do not need to work as hard to transfer. Another option that researchers have developed is focusing more on the movements themselves and making sure that they are done as effectively and efficiently as possible. The method used is called the Transfer Assessment Instrument, otherwise known as TAI, and it's broken down into 15 different steps. The Transfer Assessment Instrument is the first tool to standardize the way researchers and clinicians can evaluate transfer technique and to help identify specific skills to target during transfer training.
The goal is to obtain as high of a score as possible because that means the transfer effectively hit all 15 parts. For a study based out of the University of Pittsburgh, TAI scores increased from an average of 6.31 to 9.92 after training. This technique has also helped to identify specific transfer skills that are associated with kinetic variables related to injury risks on the upper extremities. Overall, there is a significant need for technique improvement in independent wheelchair transfers. I hope this presentation provided some insight on the prevalence of long-term injuries from multiple transfers per day, and that researchers are actively searching for a solution by analyzing the transfer breakdown using the transfer assessment instrument. Thank you for watching my presentation.